Welcome to the Pretty Powerful Podcast, where powerful women are interviewed every week to share real inspiring stories and incredible insight to help women or anyone break the barriers, be a part of innovation, shatter the glass ceiling, and dominate to the top of their sport, industry, or life's mission. Join us as we celebrate exceptional women and step into our power. And now, here's your host, Angela Gennari.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Pretty Powerful Podcast. My name is Angela Gennari, and I'm here with Daphne Leger. Hi, Daphne.
Hi, Angela. Thanks so much for sharing your audience with me.
Yes, my pleasure. So, Daphne Leger is the founder of, I'm going to say this wrong, Atrevidea?
Atrevidea. Pretty good.
She is an innovation and change expert, a trilingual global nomad. She started off in France, spent many years in the United States, and is now based in Mexico. She has a background in international development, an MBA from Harvard Business School, and extensive experience in leadership positions in startups in the technology, healthcare, and entertainment sectors. Daphne has given numerous innovation conferences, courses, and workshops on innovation and change to audiences around the world. She is also a professor, teacher, and mentor through various global executive education programs. Amazing. What a background.
Thanks, Angela.
So I don't even know where to start. I feel like there's just so many things I want to dive into. So were you born in France or you moved there?
I was born and initially raised in France. That's where the story begins.
Okay, beautiful. And so French is your first language?
That's right.
Okay. And then you came to the United States. I'm assuming there was college involved because you went to Harvard.
Yes,
Yes.
many years later, because the first time I moved to the US, I was 7.
Oh, wow. Okay, cool.
Yeah. But then, yes, I did all my studies in the US.
Okay, very nice. And now you live in beautiful Mexico. Where do you live in
That's
Mexico?
right. Mexico City.
Oh, beautiful. I love that. I actually have been there a few times and I love it. It's such a cosmopolitan city. And I think it's just one of the most beautiful but giant international cities I've been to.
I'm
It's
so glad that you
massive.
know it and that you appreciate it. I think it's one of the most awesome cities in the world and still underrated, even though it's very much on the map these days for most people.
Absolutely. Well, what was so interesting to me when I was there is it's just such a cultural hub, and it is really the center for business for Latin America.
Yeah, it really is. It's true.
Yeah,
That's why
it's beautiful.
it's an exciting place to call home base.
It was actually the first international trip I took my son on. So
Oh, how exciting.
we were working with a client who had an event in Mexico. It was the Golf Channel, and they were doing a golf tournament in Mexico City. And I had gone there when I was pregnant, actually. And so to kind of do the pre-planning, and then when the actual tournament was going on, my son he was going to be 5 months old. So we had to go have his passport photo taken because we decided to bring him with us because he was still very, very little and wanted to, he was still breastfeeding and, just wanted to not be away from him. And so getting his passport photo was hysterical because I had to hold him up. He hadn't like quite gotten the sitting up thing down. So it was
That's
pretty
adorable
awesome.
and amazing.
Yeah, so Mexico City was his very first international trip. This is very cool.
Off to a good start.
Yes, agreed. So anyway, so you studied international business.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about what drew you to international business, besides being such a great global citizen, obviously.
Yeah, so I actually started by studying international relations and
Hmm.
development. And that was very much, as you said, it kind of everything set me up to study that. My life, my upbringing, I was super drawn to the concept of anything international, and then having a positive impact was also something really important to me. And so yeah, that's what I studied initially. And I worked in that for a few years. But then I started feeling like the way that I wanted to have impact was through business. And I was missing that kind of toolkit. And so that's why I went and did the MBA to kind of complement the international piece with the business piece. So I did the MBA because I felt like I needed that in order to then use business as a way to have impact.
Very cool. So talk to me a little bit about what impact you're talking about. So when you're saying I want to go have an impact, right? So globally, tell me what that looks like.
Yeah, so it's definitely evolved. What's been constant is that that's a driving force for me and kind of a motivator and a purpose, I would say, but it's
Hmm.
evolved a lot. So when
Okay.
it started out, which is why I think I started with international relations and development, I wanted to, work in developing countries and help them develop their economies and all that. And I did that for a while, but then I started realizing I liked that the way business had a much more kind of direct and almost, I would say, transparent and honest impact, if I can say that way. And what I mean by that is that when you treat people like customers, then you have to meet their needs and their demands. And I
Mm,
found that for me personally, that was a more compelling dynamic and relationship than treating people as beneficiaries or recipients of aid or something like that. So that's why I switched to the business side of things. I liked how it was, yes, maybe some people don't have as much, but what they do have, they're going to be very careful about spending it on the right thing that's really
mhm.
responding to their problem. And that really resonated with me about how honest it would make the people like me on the other side trying to create services, products, solutions to big problems. So that's why that kind of first shift in impact happened. And then I worked in that for quite a few years in different startups and social enterprises that were looking to
Mhm.
have impact at the base of the pyramid, as we call it.
Mhm. Mhm.
And then after that, I started feeling like, oh, the way that I'm personally, like very personally having the most impact is when I'm helping people rethink, re-understand, or learn something new that kind of, I found myself feeling like I was turning people's light bulbs on. And that
Yeah.
really started to feel like impact for me. And so that
Mhm.
was kind of the third and I think the latest shift in what I call impact. And now for me today, that's what impact is. Impact is helping people change their minds and kind of expand their minds to realize their full potential. And so today, I would say I have impact by unlocking people's potential by turning on their light bulbs.
I love that. That's really cool. And I love that you changed the mindset and it was basically a whole paradigm shift of I'm going to treat people like customers and not recipients or beneficiaries because you're absolutely right. There's so much value in seeing that what you can contribute to somebody has to have value, right? Because I think that so many people look at, oh, well, when I'm providing a service, they're just happy to get whatever I give them. And that's not true. Like you have to, what you have has to have value to that person. And you start thinking about it much more intimately when you're thinking, how can I add enough value that they want me in their lives helping?
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that you bring that up because as an innovation expert, people often ask me, so what's the definition of innovation? And it's
Hmm.
this word that's gotten used too much these days and means everything and nothing.
Right,
And
right.
so I try to go back to kind of the essence and the basics, if you will. And for me, innovation is any new solution that adds value or solves a problem for someone. And
Hmm.
if it's doing that, then check. For me, it's innovation. It doesn't matter if it's super techy or not at all, if you've seen it before
Hmm.
or if it's a reinterpretation of something that already existed, because for the end user or customer, all of that doesn't matter. As long as it's adding value or solving a problem, then we're on the other side. And so I try to go
Yeah.
back to that essence and help people see that's what innovation is all about, really.
Right. I love it. Well, and innovation could be just something as simple as finding an efficiency, right? Like, hey, I see that you're doing this in 6 steps. I think you can do it in 3. And, that's innovative. You're saving somebody some time and effort or money or something. There's innovation there. Even if
Yeah,
it's just something really simple and mundane that nobody is really like, oh, yeah, well, that's simple. Why are we going around this, problem? So, yeah, I love that. So
100%.
you really kind of drive this idea of, initiating change. So people hate change, don't they? I mean, don't they really push back on that? So how do you get people into the mindset to be open to change?
Yeah. So I should maybe back up and say why I even got into this because it's
Yeah.
a bit of a leap or it's maybe a little jump, a hop. But so I really started my whole career in well, first of all, impact as we talked about, and then it morphed
Hmm.
into business and then innovation.
Yeah.
And then the latest kind of leap has been towards change, as you said. And
Hmm.
it's because I started to realize that I grew up in a very particular way with constant change. As we started to
Right.
chat about a bit, I moved
Right.
around a lot within France, then to the US, then to India, Canada, and then I just kept going as soon as I could. And
Uh-huh.
so it kind of developed a very particular relationship for me with change, almost an addiction, I would say.
Yeah.
And then when I started working in innovation, I started to realize, just like you said, you have to go through change to get to innovation, and yet people do not like that part of it. They
Mm-mm.
really, have this initial reaction that's very negative against change, and it's totally normal. But it got me fascinated to realize we were not on the same page when it
Yeah.
came to change. And so I started kind of studying, analyzing this topic, talking to all the experts, writing a book. And today I use all that knowledge about change to help others kind of prepare for the future. Because for me, that's what this concept that I'm using called changeability is. It's preparing you for the future. And indeed, most people are not prepared for the future right now because
No.
they're not changeable. And we can talk about, why do we have that initial reaction to change? For sure. The first thing that I would say is it's totally normal and natural. It's the most human thing in the world to
Hmm.
be resistant to change. And I don't think that it's that, oh, some humans resist change and others don't. We are all there sometimes. We all
Hmm.
resist some changes sometimes. It's
Hmm.
just then how do you overcome that to keep moving forward?
Yeah, well, and I think that when you're talking about change, I mean, it can be a cultural thing, right? So you have traveled extensively, and so sometimes there's an unwillingness to change because this is how their parents did it, this is how their grandparents did it, this is how ancestors have done it before them. And then when you get into the business world, you realize that's how this CEO learned to do it, and then that they learned from that CEO, and then next in line it's going to do it this way, and then you get the phrase of this is how it's always been done, which I hate that phrase.
It's a
So
really common one. Yeah, it ends
yeah,
up
yeah.
being the reason not to change or innovate in anything. Yeah, pretty common and standard. You're
Mhm.
hinting at something, Angela, that I want to double click on, which is um, the idea of how exposed to change you've been.
Yes.
So clearly, I was brought up incredibly exposed to change, and then I just kept going.
Mhm.
I don't think it was part of a master plan. That's just the way that it ended up happening.
Right.
But I think that there's something that happens the more you are exposed to change, and also something that happens when you're never exposed to change. And it turns out that there's this concept in psychology that I don't know if you've heard of called exposure therapy.
Uh-huh.
Um,
I have
and
heard of
it's the
that.
idea, yeah. So the example I like the most is people who are afraid of heights.
Right.
We can help them work through that, and it'll start with something as simple as look at this photo of a view from a skyscraper. Right. And then,
Mm.
okay, now that you've done that, go to the second floor of a building and look out the window. And then, you know what? Next, we're going to go stand on the balcony of the fifth floor, and so on and so forth. And as you get exposed, you kind of learn to manage your reaction, and you eventually change that, very deep kind of ingrained reaction. And I think the same can happen with change. I've been doing it first unconsciously. It was done to me, and then I just kept going. And I've been helping others now kind of redefine their relationship to change through this exposure, because I think that's the best way. Of course, if you've never been exposed to change, when it comes for you, and it will, it's going to be
Mhm.
difficult, and you're not going to react well. And if you've been practicing with little changes in your everyday life, then you're much better equipped to deal with change when it comes.
Well, and I love that you can, this is professional and personal, right? Like so many people struggle with this idea of, I don't want to leave this really, really toxic relationship because it's all I've ever known. Or, I don't want to separate from my family, even though it's not the right environment for me to thrive because, this is a routine and they don't want to change where they go to work, even though they don't enjoy their job and they feel like it's taking away from their life because they don't want to change. And I think change gives you the blessing of like newness, right? Like I love change. I have like a cycle of like 7 to 10 years, which at that point something drastic has to change in my life, right? And so I have that like 7 to 10 year itch where it's like, okay, I've been doing this for 10 years now. What else? Give me something else. Throw something at me, give me a new challenge. And so, and you don't have to make a drastic change. I'm not saying, go get divorced every 10 years. I'm saying, just refresh, do just something simple that gives you, some kind of that viability again.
Yeah, 100%. So the things that you were mentioning, are things that I've been studying and analyzing and helping people through recently, which are kind of the reasons we resist initially. The first step that I always advise when we're dealing with change for yourself or with others as a leader is map the reaction. Like
Oh,
really,
interesting.
figure it out for
Yeah.
yourself or for others. And so when you're mapping that initial reaction, you're going to look for, what are the fears or the biases that are making me think about certain things that I will lose and maybe not see certain gains, because it really comes down to that. We always do a little bit of mental math when we're faced with a
Mm,
change, and it's what are the losses and what are the gains. And
yeah.
we think we're incredibly rational, and we
Right.
are in the sense that it's very clear, equation. If the gains outweigh the losses, I'm in, and if the losses
Mm-hmm.
outweigh the gains, this is not for me. The only
Mm,
problem is that in that evaluation, that's where all those biases and fears come in. And so one of the ones that you mentioned is fascinating, sorry, and it's the mere exposure effect, or the familiarity principle. And it's the idea of just because we know something, we like it better, even though it's probably not great for us.
right,
And maybe
right.
that or we don't. And so some of the examples you were giving, it's kind of like, I've been here, I've been in this situation for a while. It's what I know.
Mm,
I don't really like it. It's, doing me harm, or it's not unlocking all the potential I have, but it's what I know. And
hmm
so getting past that and realizing, wait, but aren't there some gains on the other side of this change that you are not really giving, space or weight to? And maybe the losses, you're kind of over indexing on those. We tend to think, we're going to lose everything and it's going to be terribly painful. And so the first thing is understanding that. And yeah, okay, it's a little bit irrational. So you might recognize that in yourself or in
hmm
others, but it,
hmm
it is the reason for the reaction. And so first you have to understand it. And if you ever want to do what I would call the second step, which is recalibrate that reaction.
Yes. So, I deal with this in my business world as well. Like we have we go to bid on something and we know that the client is unhappy with their current provider, right? So I own a security company. We know they're unhappy. We know they have all these issues. And so we submit a bid. They're so excited about all the things that we do. They're so like, yeah, this all sounds great. Our provider doesn't do any of these things. And then they go and re-sign with their other provider. And we're like, well, what happened? And it's one of those, it's the devil you know versus the devil you don't. It's like, I already know what all their shortcomings are. And while this sounds good, I don't know what yours are yet.
Mhm.
Right. And so,
100%.
and so,
So I've been, as I was writing the book Future Proof, I kind of
uh-huh.
looked for the cultural aspects of this, and I found some version of the saying that you just shared in every single language. It's
Really
this universal human truth that we
interesting.
are, afraid of the unknown and
Mm-hmm.
don't really want to delve into it and would
Mm-hmm.
rather stick to what we know. And it makes total sense. I also want to
Right.
give some credit and its place to fear.
Yeah.
Fear keeps us alive.
Yeah.
That's what it's
Yeah.
for. And
Yeah.
it's for you and I and anyone who's listening, it's done a very good job to date. That's why we're
Sure.
here.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you do want to say, thank you, fear, for keeping me safe and
Mm-hmm.
avoiding my demise. And also, sometimes you overreact, sometimes you overdo it, right? And
Yes.
so recognizing that sometimes it's on, hyperdrive and we need to tone it down and
Yeah.
think a little bit more carefully about those potential gains, like the client that you were talking about. Of course, some of their evaluation was, oh, the switching costs, it's just going to be such a
Mhm.
nuisance to switch to another provider and have to start all over again. And so those are real losses that are there if they decide to switch. They're real.
Right.
But it's just that they're, this big compared to what they're imagining this gargantuan switch to be.
Right.
And this idea also of sunk costs, that's another bias that we have that most of us are familiar with, right? Of like,
hmm
I've already put so much into this other provider. It's not great, but we've been doing this for years. And so I've got to keep going. That
hmm
is totally irrational. And yet we all apply that thinking. And it keeps us away from making changes that in my book, change is the path to a better future. It always
Yes.
is. If you think about
Always.
anything that's
Mm.
been an improvement in your life, it had to come through change. So there's
Yes.
always that moment that's a little bit painful and uncomfortable that you have to go through to get on the other side.
Absolutely. Well, and when you're dealing with, like, let's just say, making a change, you've learned how to compensate, right? Like, you've counterbalanced the issues. So it's like, well, I know that, I'm having these struggles, but I've already learned how to work with them because I just overstaff here. I just do this, or I just manage this, and I just, I cut the budget here so that I can compensate there. Like, they've already learned how to counterbalance whatever the issues are. And now coming into a new provider, they're like, well, we've learned how to work with all the bad things, and so now we have a system that works. And it's like, does it work though? Does it, or does it not work? And you've just been tolerating a really bad system for a really long time
Yeah.
because of the fear of change and because of the fear of, like, well, I mean, we've learned how to work through these issues, so it should be fine. And we're in a good place, is what they usually say. We're in a good place. I'm like, no.
How good of a place?
I
Yeah, and
know.
is good enough, right?
Hmm.
And a lot of times change is about unlocking the next level and the potential
Mm.
that's untapped, and so it's for better. And so yeah, good. Yeah, you're good. Is that where
Yeah.
you want to stay,
Yeah.
or could we do better, right?
Right. Can we be great?
Yeah, exactly. Does great
Hmm.
sound good? Maybe we could do that.
Exactly.
Another thing that I work through a lot and that I've been analyzing and studying is that transition.
Mm.
Most people don't like change, not really because of what will eventually be, but because of the process to get there. They know that it's going to be, costly, timely, painful, disturbing, whatever it might be. And so we just don't want to go through the hassle.
Yeah.
And so I think what's clear to me, if you want to change more yourself to get to a better future and help others change, you have to anticipate that transition.
Yeah.
And in change management, it's often called, the messy middle or the chaotic transition or whatever cute name you want to put on a very painful moment that you have to go
Hmm.
through. And I
Hmm.
think that if we can all anticipate that, then we can manage it proactively so much better, right? So if it was with my potential, client, it's okay. So the first 3 weeks of us working together are going to be a little painful. How can I make it less painful for you? And
Right.
sometimes that might mean there's this concept in the tech world of hypercare, which I love
Mm.
because I think we should apply it in other places. And it's the idea of, kind of doubling down on giving extra customer support just during that transition, because they
Interesting.
know, especially in technology adoption, that if they don't get it right in those first few weeks, everyone's just going to give up on this new technology and go back to the old way.
Mm.
And so they kind of put in way more than reasonable support at the very beginning. And then they start kind of getting back hands off when they know that people can handle the new situation. And so I think we should be doing hypercare with ourselves and with others in any kind of change
I love that
to help
concept.
ourselves through the transition.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think that's brilliant. And, we're not doing enough of that in our day-to-day lives, even simple changes that we could be like, you know what, I'm going to give myself grace, because that's another word that we don't use enough, is grace. I'm going to give myself grace through the process, and it's even just going to the gym. I'm going to develop a new routine. I'm going to go to the gym, 4 days a week. This is going to be my routine. But you fail one time, you oversleep one time, and you're like, forget it, I won't do it. But you got to give yourself a little grace. And that hypercare concept is brilliant because you can apply that to yourself and say, I'm going through a change. I need to give myself a little extra care right now and support, and not beat myself up constantly because things aren't at 100% already.
Exactly. And the data shows that when you go through a change, mostly organizations, but of course it applies to humans that are a part of those
Hmm.
organizations, there is a dip in performance, which is
Mm.
why everyone hates change, because they
Yeah.
know things are going to be harder before they get better. And so
Mm.
having that grace for yourself and with others of where it's gonna be a little bit harder before it gets better, and we're kind of building that into the plan of the change,
Yeah.
it just makes things so much more smooth. So I think it's super important I love that you use the word grace. Yes, have grace with yourself and with
Yeah.
others as you transition through any change.
Yeah. Well, and what I think is really important, and I've read a few books on change because I joke that I've been operating my company as a startup for the past 10 years because I like constant change, and constant change keeps us hungry, and it keeps us aware of what's happening. And, we pivot when we need to pivot, but it can be exhausting for people. Right? sorry, my microphone went out for a minute, but it can be exhausting for other people. And so, when you find that, just communicate, communicate. This is what we're doing. We're going to give each other a little grace. Let's talk about what we're going through and, share if something is bothering us or something's not sitting right, like let's share that information so that we can stay on top of it and not build resentment and not build fear and not build, this wall of resentment to change.
Yeah, 100%. There's this concept of change fatigue, which
Oh,
is important to kind of
yeah,
have as leaders, which is at some point, your people will just be like, that's enough. Like
yeah,
there were 5 changes last year or last month or whatever. I can't take anymore. I'm not even, on board on those, and there's more coming. So we have to be super careful about that because change is difficult. And
mm,
as, a change addict and lover as I am, I'm going to tell you, it doesn't get easier. It's not that
yeah,
change is easy for me now. It's just that I have this confidence, if you will. I know that I'm always going to get through it because I've gone through it so many times and I kind of
yeah,
know the more or less the path and the steps, but it's always difficult by its
yeah.
very nature. And so there is such a thing as change fatigue for all of us.
Hmm.
Another thing that I think is helpful for ourselves and as leaders is when everything is changing or when something is changing, it's important to also focus on what's not changing. That gives
Yeah,
people so much, serenity and stability within that chaos that we talked about to say, yes, this, A is changing, but B is going to stay the same. And
yeah,
so I also advise that for us, for ourselves when we're going through change and we feel like we're, kind of getting the rug pulled out from under us or things are just unstable is okay, but what is still the same? And
mm,
what routines can I kind of hold on to mark that stability and give myself the stability that I need? We all need stability within, and around the things that are changing. And I think that's somewhat helpful.
yeah,
And I want to double click on a point that you said, Angela, about communication, just
hmm,
because it's fascinating as I've been researching this. In pretty much every change initiative, when you ask the leaders if they've done enough communication, their answer is, oh my gosh, we did so much communication, check. And
yeah,
then you
yeah.
ask the people, and they always say it wasn't enough. It's, we don't
Wow.
really understand what's going on. It's not clear. And so it's to such a big point that you can see that there's a disconnect there.
Yeah.
And what I found analyzing this is one of the key explanations is as we go through change, we're in a moment of stress, right?
Mm,
And when you're stressed, you do not process information as effectively. And so
interesting.
when your organization or your leader tells you something once, it's kind of like in one ear, out the other, because
Yeah.
you're just dealing with so much. And so that's why we have this concept, which sounds so strange, of over communicating. You have to over communicate because people are not as receptive or not processing as effectively as usual because change is stressful. So
Yeah.
having that empathy and doing that extra work as leaders, and when I say leader, it could be in your family, right? Just to help people get through that transition and that change is super important.
Well, and I think everybody takes communication differently. Like I might send out 7 emails about something, but then I'll have, some staff that are like, well, you never told us that. I'm like, I literally like 7 emails. I was spamming you. And they're like, yeah, but you didn't say it at our last meeting. And I'm like, but that wasn't the topic of our meeting. And so, yeah, so some people need to see, some people need to hear, some people need to read. And so you have to meet people where they are. And that's a big factor when it comes to change is, our level of comfort is different. Not everybody is going to be able to like, oh, I can dive into this email and read it and understand it. Some people need to see it to understand it. Some people need to feel it to understand it. Some people need to, see a video, versus read an email. So,
Yeah.
there's a lot that, you have to meet people where they are, and so that
Yeah.
they can digest change at the same rate that you want them to kind of experience what you're experiencing.
100%. And the thing that I would add to that is two things. First of all, they won't all process it and experience it at the same time in the same way. And so,
Right.
hoping that everyone is on the same page in your organization is not going to be realistic. So it's important to
Hmm.
start to say, oh, look, this group is on board and we're ready to go.
Yeah.
And this other group needs a little bit more of that hyper care hand holding that we had talked
Mm,
about to get there. Right.
yeah. Yeah.
And this group is not there and is not going to get there, doesn't want to get there. And then we have to manage that as well. And that brings me to the second point, which is this idea of like mapping the people that are going through the change, or the stakeholders, as we say in, in business jargon, but just to say, okay, who's already on board? There's no point in, hashing out the message 5 times. They were on board before I even said anything.
Right.
And those are the, promoters or the early adopters or whatever we want to call them. And then who is, a detractor or, straggling behind or whatever that may be. And that's fine. But just understanding those different positions and then treating them accordingly, I think is important and is key to success. Because just, I sent out one email and I'm sure everyone processed it the same way, and now we're all ready to go together, is a little bit idealistic.
That's so true. So, so, so true. Because I mean, even on our team, we have those who, if I were to call them every day, okay, did you get the email? Are we good? Do you need anything? Or, are we ready for this change? Are we ready to implement? And they're like, would you stop calling me? Like, I'm fine. And then you have others who are like, can you tell me about that again? Because I'm not following what you're doing. And why are we doing this? And can you give me like the background on it? And I'm like, but, and so you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
So, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, there's another point that you mentioned, Angela, that I just wanted to come back to, which is you mentioned a little bit. I heard kind of the idea of being somewhat flexible, and it's important, and it's one of the principles that I've developed as well, which is iterating, as we go. I think it's important to not pretend or assume or think that you're going to get it right on the first go, because we never do. And change is obviously dynamic by its very nature. And so kind of being clear, transparent, and admitting that, from the get-go is super important. And I struggled with that at the beginning, to think, well, how does a leader who needs to, lead people clearly and not show like I have no clue what I'm doing, or I'm full of doubts, also leave space for that. And through the book process, I interviewed a lot of experts and leaders, and the answer has been very clear, and it's been be very clear and even strict on the vision, and be flexible on the details.
Yes, yeah.
And so we're going here to point Z. That's not really negotiable. That is the vision of where we're going. I hope you'll join me. How we get there, we're going to figure it out as we go. I have this initial plan, and I'm going to be checking in with you together. It'll probably evolve, because that's the very nature of change. And I think that's the most kind of humane, human, and transparent way to do this, and therefore the most effective way.
Yeah, absolutely. And they also, another way to put it is be clear on the goal and flexible on the process, right?
Yeah,
it's very similar, but yeah, I think that that's so true. And there's so much validity to that, because, if you say we're going to get to X revenue this year, but then, your strategy for getting there is just blowing up in your face constantly, then, don't change the goal, just change the strategy, and you'll get there. You just got to tweak something. And usually it's a pretty simple thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And you were mentioning earlier that this applies so much at a level, personal and professional. And I find that this topic, that's the case in every single sub point of it as well. This is an excellent example. I've gotten away from setting super specific kind of inflexible goals to more general goals that the how can change along the way, and I found that having that grace with myself of, maybe the path to get there is going to change, leaves me with much more flexibility throughout the year, for example, as we think about our, our annual goals to get there, but to get there, in the most effective way, given that things are going to change along the way.
So can you give me an example of that? Like, one of the things that would you say is a general goal versus a specific goal?
Yeah. So, for example, let's say that I'm thinking of, I don't know, I'm wondering if I should, become a podcast host or a keynote speaker or a book author. I'm going very high level here with this example, but instead of being focused on that, I want to be a thought leader. Right. And that kind of opens up avenues for me to realize maybe, later in the year, keynote speaking is going to become much more pertinent for some reason that I just can't see right now. And, writing a book or publishing a book will be less. And so I'll be able to pivot and adjust because my goal was, who do I want to be? I want to be a thought leader, not what exact specific thing do I want to, achieve by July. And so at a personal level, I found that that's useful. Now, businesses need goals and things that are, measurable and clear to work on. So I think, you have to kind of calibrate accordingly. But in general, my point is leave some flexibility for what exactly that ends up looking like.
Yeah, that's beautiful. So talk to me a little bit more about, what does future proofing mean and how do we get there?
Yeah. So future proof for me is tied to this concept of changeability. For me, changeability is the one skill that's going to get us future proof. And changeability is this capacity to drive and embrace both planned and unplanned change as a path to a better future. And I talk about both of those changes because they're both difficult. We sometimes think, planned change is super easy. That's the ones that I actually want to do. Well, 92% of New Year's resolutions don't get done, right?
True.
So we
That's
choose
true.
them and then we don't quite make them happen. Or 70% of change initiatives in organizations fail. So those are changes that people said, let's do this, and then couldn't. And then unplanned change, I think everyone knows intuitively that it's difficult because you didn't see it coming. But either way, having the capacity to say this change is going to unlock something better, I think is really important. And the reason I talk about that making you future proof is I think we're in an era that is being called, exponential change. So if you're feeling like change is coming kind of harder, faster, bigger, more frequent than ever before, it's because it is, right?
Yeah.
And you might think, oh, I'm sure they said that every time before. I mean, the data kind of when you plot it on a graph, it's clear it's bigger than it ever was before. We actually, most of human history were pretty stable. Things didn't change that quickly, and now they are. And so I think that with this pace of change, it's really impossible to say, oh, this is the one hard skill that's going to make you future proof, because it's very, very probable that in 6 months it will no longer be relevant because I can't really predict the future. Yeah. And so within this era of such volatile and unpredictable change, that more soft skill of being able to adapt to whatever comes becomes much more valuable, right? And I think in general, we're getting away from valuing hard-coded skills because they become obsolete so quickly. And we're starting to value that adaptability to learn whatever needs to be learned for, whatever the future is going to bring. So that's what I mean by being future-proof. It's basically ready to adapt to whatever comes your way and using change as your biggest ally to get to a better future.
Well, and I think we never saw a bigger change than during the pandemic. Like during the pandemic, we went from, and that was one of those unexpected changes, unexpected things that happen. You're like, who planned for that, right? Like nobody planned for that. Nobody had a pandemic protocol, right? Because they're like, can you send me your pandemic protocols? I'm like, my what? And so but then, we all adapted to Zoom calls and remote learning and remote working, and that became like, okay, we figured this out, and then that opened up the world, right? So even though all of my meetings might have been mostly with people in Atlanta where I live, now all of a sudden I can meet with people all around the world. All my podcasts could be based here in Atlanta, and now they can be Mexico City. I'm having a conversation. So it opened up everything. But now we're kind of in that weird place of like, do we continue with this forward motion of remote work, because we kind of miss being in front of people too?
Absolutely, yeah. I think it's the ability to reinvent yourself, like we all did to some extent, some more, some less during the pandemic.
Yeah.
And to kind of innovate on yourself, right?
Yeah.
In order to stay relevant, both as a person, as a professional, and then as organizations that we're a part of or that we lead. And so change becomes key to that. And, you don't have to become a change addict like me. That's a bit extreme. You're welcome to come to my end of the spectrum if you want to, but I think you just need to move to a place along the spectrum where change is no longer the enemy and this boogeyman that you're fearing, like when is it going to hit me and how can I hide from it? And more like just this is a part of the reality of this constant growth and evolution that we're in, and it is the mechanism by which that happens.
Yeah. Well, and the forced change can actually bring about the changes that you then plan, right? So like, okay, that was a change I didn't like, but it happened. But now I'm kind of planning my future towards this change. And so I like that we can take control of it and that we then can determine the process at which, we want to move.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I will say about that, because we're always gonna like plan change more than
Hmm.
unplanned change. I mean,
Hmm.
and it's for
Hmm.
that very important word that you just mentioned, which is control, which we all
Right.
love.
Right.
I'm the
Right.
first that will say I love to control everything
Uh-huh.
around me, right? So yes, but what I will say is even though we don't plan for it, once it hits us, this unplanned change, we can still control a lot. We can control how
Hmm.
we react to it, which is
True.
everything. Right.
Hmm.
And there's this really fascinating thought experiment that came out of Google, and it's called the eraser test. I don't know if you've heard of it.
No.
Okay. So this leader at Google basically started asking thousands of people about the hardest thing that had ever happened in their lives,
Hmm.
unplanned changes. Right.
Interesting.
And he asked them, okay, imagine if we've developed this technology at Google where we can just erase that completely from your life,
Hmm.
including all the implications that it had, just everything gone. Would you want us to apply the eraser to this event, occurrence, whatever it was? 99% of people say no.
Wow,
Yeah.
really?
And I've
Interesting.
applied the eraser test now with people who have gone through harrowing, really tough things, and it's the same result.
Really?
And the reason is because it becomes a huge impetus for incredible transformation in your life that even though it was difficult and negative, even we could say, you can't erase it anymore afterwards because it's so important to who you grew into, who you evolved into. And I mean this at a personal level, but it could also be at an organizational level, et cetera. And so I think it's important to keep that in mind, keep that
Hmm.
perspective. When you're in the thick of it, it's going to be very hard to,
Hmm.
already have that distance and say, oh, at some point I'm going to ask that this never be erased from my life. But try to remember that people say that about the hardest things that have ever happened to them. And I mean really difficult things.
Hmm.
So I think it shows that it's really about that perspective and how there can be positive ramifications if you decide to look at it that way that you won't be able to see right in the moment.
That's 100% true. And I always look at it, I always say challenge is what grows character, right? Like you can't, if your life is super, super, super easy, you're not developing character. You're not developing that toughness that you need to be able to do problem solving. One of the things that parents are getting criticized for now is because they're solving all their kids' problems. And then the kids get into the workforce and they don't know how to solve problems anymore. And now all of a sudden, like they're really in a bad spot because they can't figure out how to get from A to B. It's like, well, I've never been challenged like that. And, there's no accountability, there's no responsibility. And so there's a generation of people out there that, people are criticizing because they don't have problem solving ability, because don't have that character development that you learn through change and through challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. And that brings me back to my previous world of innovation. We always talk about innovation transforming problems into opportunities, right?
Yeah.
And it gets to such a level that as an innovator, when you see a problem, you think, oh, yummy.
Yeah,
What can
yeah.
we do with this? Like there's an
Yeah.
opportunity here, right?
Yep.
And that's a way to look at the world that really rewires everything and changes your reality.
It really does. Have you ever read the book The Obstacle is the Way?
Ooh, I haven't. I've heard the title, but
Oh,
I haven't read
so
it.
good. So good. So it's just exactly what you were just saying. So it's about how to look at something and say, wow, that's really challenging. I'm going to dive right into that and figure out how to solve it because if I'm having that problem, other people are having that problem, right? So I'm going to focus on that problem and find the solution to that. And so I just think there's a lot of brilliance in looking at problems and imagining how to get through it because that's where the true value is when you're like you were saying before adding value to something.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love that.
Very cool. So who inspires you?
I think my answer is not going to surprise you. It's going to be anybody who shows what I call changeability or
Yeah.
what others might call adaptability.
Yeah.
And so I'm always kind of on the lookout for
Hmm.
examples of that. I can tell you about one recent one here in Mexico. There's this tribe of indigenous communities called the Raramuri. They're in the
Hmm.
north. They're in the Mexican equivalent of the Grand Canyon. We have this amazing canyon in the north called the Copper Canyon.
Okay.
It's even deeper and longer than the Grand Canyon. It's
Wow.
amazing. So they live in that area, and I'm really inspired in particular by the women of that community. They're actually world famous because they are incredible runners. Because
Interesting.
they live in this really rugged, very intense terrain, as you can imagine in this
Hmm.
canyon.
Hmm.
And they live in these communities that are a little bit kind of separated one from the other. And so they have developed this ability to, and this necessity, I guess, but to run from one place to the other in order to get there, more effectively. And so what's fascinating is as the modern world has connected with them to a very little extent, but to some extent, they've become participants in these ultra trail running competitions, and
Interesting.
they participate in their traditional garb. So they're wearing like these beautiful dresses and these sandals, like very basic materials. And they outrun professional runners from all over the world consistently.
That's outstanding. I
It's
love that.
fascinating. Yeah. And
Yeah.
they've adapted as a community and as individuals to these incredibly harsh conditions, but it's kind
Hmm.
of created this superpower in them
Yeah.
that we, can admire in these feats that we participate in as well. But it's a really good example of like we can adapt to things that seem insurmountable, and it could unlock this potential that's just, not seen initially.
Oh, unbelievable. I absolutely love that story so much. And I love any kind of story about resilience. I think resilience is one of the most beautiful character traits anyone can have. And when you see somebody go through something really, really tough and they come out on the other side of that, I mean, I just am so inspired by the strength and the resolve that they have to get there.
Absolutely.
So, speaking of challenges, can you tell me about some challenges and obstacles that you've had to overcome in writing your book and starting this journey through innovation?
Yeah. Where to begin? There's a lot of
I
them. So first of
know.
all, in innovation, unsurprisingly, as it's part of what led me to this change focus, I faced a lot of resistance all the time. Every
Mm,
single time I would have a project, the first reaction was, no, we don't want to do this. No, that's
yeah.
not possible. No, I don't like it.
Hmm.
And I remember in my last corporate job, I was in a really big multinational actually company here. And I was about 6 months into my innovation role in this company, and the strategy head of the entire company had a meeting with me, and he told me, "Daphne, you're a virus." And this was before the pandemic, but it was still a bit offensive to be
Yeah.
called a virus. And so he explained further, and it was brilliant because what he explained to me was, you're coming into this organization that is an organism that has been established through decades and decades
Mm,
to protect itself from any kind of disturbance, basically. So it's all process and protocols, and everything has to run just so, and it's
mhm.
what's led us to all of this success. Right.
Yeah.
And that is what a big company or successful organization is. And you're coming in and you're saying, oh, could we just mess with that and do it differently or just try something else? And of course, the reaction of this organism is to push back and to protect itself, because every single person in this organism has been taught that the recipe to success is to do things exactly just so. And it
Mm,
was super helpful when he explained to me why I was getting that initial reaction from the entire organization and every area and person. And so I realized, okay, yeah, that's true. I'm
yeah.
a virus. Hi. I'd like to be a good virus, right? I'd
Uh-huh.
like to be a virus that manages to convince the organism that this is going to be better for it. But I need to kind of have the empathy to know that's what the initial reaction is going to be. And it's incredibly rational and makes total sense. So that was a challenge I had to face over and over again, which led me to a lot of the learning I think that I can now share.
Hmm.
And the second one I'll mention is as I, delved into writing a book, Writing was not my medium. If
Hmm.
you can't tell, I'm a talker,
Yeah.
which is why I'm having such a fascinating time in this conversation.
Mhm.
But so, I can get up on a stage in front of 500 people and like I feel comfortable. I'm in my flow. It's where I'm, meant to be.
Yeah.
Sitting down and writing is a very different challenge for me. And so
Right.
I had a really tough time with it. And everything that you can imagine, all the imposter syndrome and who am I to be writing a book and all of that kind of came pouring in. And just the mechanism of how to do this work that I was so unused to was really tough.
Mm.
And I remember I got the recommendation, which is a very good one, to write every single day for 30 minutes.
Yeah, I've
And
heard
I
that.
tried. I tried. For a long
And
time I tried and I failed
oh.
miserably. And I felt terrible about it. And I just felt like, because I'm leading a business, so my day is a little bit crazy and I'm teaching
Hmm.
courses and giving conferences and facilitating workshops. And so just putting in a 30-minute slot to write was totally unrealistic. I
Mm.
wasn't able to, get into that mode for just 30 minutes within my day. And so it didn't work. And it took me a while to find my own system and method, which was the opposite of that. It was basically every weekend or so block, 3 or 4 hours and just like dive in and get into that very different mode of working and creative kind of setting. And I often would go somewhere else in order to do that. And
Hmm.
that's what started working for me. And
Interesting.
so it just showed me what you were mentioning before of, when someone tells you like go run and do it this way, you need to adapt it to what works to you.
Mm.
And so I had to learn a whole new way of working in order to do this type of work that I wasn't used to.
Interesting. Yeah, I like that because you're right. And when you're told to do something, it may not fit your particular MO. And I'm the same way. People are like, well, just get up earlier, just do this, just stay up late. And I'm like, it's so hard. Like I'm not a morning person. I'm an evening person. And I end up working. Like last night, I worked until 1 o'clock in the morning on doing really nothing of just getting tasks done. But
Yeah.
then I was exhausted this morning and I didn't want to get up. But yeah, people tell you what works for them and then they expect it. Well, you can just plug this into your life. But like I would need to find my own way to do it and then it would be embraced. But,
Yeah.
sometimes you just got to figure out your own way.
Yeah, just kind of trial and error
Hmm.
experiment.
Hmm.
And that grace that we were talking about
Yes.
of kind of,
Yes.
yeah, giving yourself some grace. And also I'm a huge fan of the idea of, just 1% better than yesterday leads
Mm.
to huge change over the long run. And so, yeah,
True.
dividing things into really bite size
Yeah.
parts of the challenge.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. Well, I'm glad you wrote the book, and I'm glad it got through it. And I understand the imposter syndrome, and I've been trying to write a book now for literally years, and I keep giving myself all the excuses of like, maybe in 6 months things will slow down. Maybe I'll do this, maybe I'll do that. And I've tried to listen to the right 30 minutes every day thing, and I'm like, I can't get in the zone in 30 minutes. 30 minutes it takes me to just get focused and then it's
100%.
time that's done and
Yeah.
now I got to move on to other things. So yeah,
Yeah.
I'm with you.
Yeah.
So I always ask on the podcast if there's ever a time that you gave your power away, because as women I think that we give our power away fairly often when it comes to just letting someone else take credit for our work, or giving allowing someone to treat us poorly in an attempt to be likable. We have a lot of those traits. Can you think of a time that you've given your power away and another time that you've stepped into your power?
Oh, it's a powerful question
Yeah.
indeed. Um, the thing that comes to mind is not an event, it's more like a phase of life.
Yeah.
I was extremely shy when I was
Oh,
younger.
really?
Yeah, I know. That's the reaction I always get like, you? Are you sure? That doesn't sound like you. But I was. From basically 0 to 18, I was, I mean, debilitatingly shy. Like
Really?
I would get really anxious in like social situations. I would always kind of try to avoid them. And it was, I gave all my power away. Basically, I was like, please don't give me
Yeah.
any power. I wouldn't know what to do with it. I don't want anyone to see me with power. Yeah, it was really tough. And as you can imagine, moving around so much, I was the new
Hmm.
girl all the time. And so if you add on top of that being shy, it was a tough, tough experience. And I can't really tell you why and how, but I I would actually, part of the explanation is that my father was really good at giving me little challenges. I think it goes back to the exposure therapy that we were talking about, of
Oh,
like,
okay.
ask the waiter for this, or, go talk to this
Mm,
person or whatever. And it was excruciating, but I would sometimes try to do it.
yeah.
But anyway, it took me until I was about, I think around 18 when I went to university to start to come out of my shell. And it was a process, right?
Mhm.
And it's fascinating because at this point, I'm so far away from that little girl who was so shy.
Yeah.
And I'm in front of audiences all the time. I love being on stage. I love being the center of attention and just like sharing with, a huge group of people if I can, anything that I find, valuable or useful for them. But it's that little girl could have never even imagined that, she would have trembled just at the idea of
Yeah.
what I'm doing now. And so, yeah, it's just a huge transformation that took a very long time. And now for me, being in this position and being a woman who's in this position is super important. And I work a lot to kind of share that space and share that power with other women as well. And I facilitate a group here in Mexico City of we're basically called powerful women,
Uh-huh.
um, and we get together and try to support each other and drive and push and kind of be there for each other in a way that I think we would have needed before and are glad to have now, just to help women step into their space and take that power, so that it doesn't take 18 years.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm very proud of myself for the transformation because it's a big one.
Yeah, that's for sure a big one. Well, congratulations on that because I mean that's a huge, huge transformation. But I love your story, and there's so much of that that I love. I love that you have a tribe of women now that you all support each other because I think we all need that, especially when you're trying to promote that, like the be powerful and own it and step into that power because sometimes it's really hard when it's just you and you're trying to convince yourself to do it and you're trying to convince yourself to walk into that room and do that pitch and trying to convince yourself that you want to say something about your book, but you're like, I don't want to, like, but having that tribe of women, I have found that to be one of the greatest motivators in my life.
100%.
So, yeah.
It's beautiful that we're in an era where that's happening more and more.
Yes. Yes.
And I see, the younger generations, it kind of comes built in a little bit more, but
Yeah.
as we know, we never have to take any of that for granted and we have to keep pushing
Right.
and supporting.
100%. So, Daphne, I've just loved this conversation. This has been so insightful, and I've loved learning about change and innovation and future proofing and all of these amazing things. But I just have one more question for you. What do you wish more people knew?
That's a big one,
Yeah.
especially for someone whose job it is to turn on light bulbs. So many
Yeah.
things, but maybe something that we really slightly touched on, but I would want to say more clearly. I think it's a lesson that I've learned over and over again in my life, and I'm probably gonna have to learn it 5 more times because
Huh?
it's easy to forget. But it's that the way you decide to see anything changes everything. Um,
Ooh.
and someone who said it much better than me is Shakespeare's Hamlet.
Uh-huh.
And he said, "There's nothing good or bad, but thinking makes it so."
Ooh.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that can change your day. It can change the world inside your mind, and therefore the world around you. Just this idea that there's the situation, and there's how you decide to see it, how you decide to face it, and that makes the difference. I mean, it's an incredibly powerful difference. And I say it's a lesson I've had to learn over and over again because I learn it and then it kind of slips away and then I
Mm-hmm.
learn it again. But every time that I've got it clear, I feel myself giving kind of quantum leaps in my evolution, my progress, my power, my growth. And so I think if it's something we can all work on and it can unlock incredible potential in ourselves.
Gosh, what a beautiful way to end this because I just love that concept. And you're right. I mean, the way you think of something can really change. Just it's life changing, right? So if you think something's bad, it is. If you think something's good, it is. Whatever you decide is it's right because it's
That's
right for
right.
you. So
Yeah.
beautiful. So how can people find you?
So they can find me on Instagram. I'm at Atrevidea, which was that tough company name in Spanish, by Daphne, or on LinkedIn, Daphne Leger. But I also prepared a little something for your audience.
Beautiful.
I wanted to invite them to go to atrevidea.com/future. So that's atrevidea.com/future. And I prepared a guide to breaking routines in your life and work, which I think is the first step that you can take to start to change your relationship to change. So I wanted to invite you to check that out if that's of interest. And then you'll also get updates on the Future Proof book, which is coming soon.
Yay. Well, thank you so much. So amazing. So I've loved our conversation. I'm wishing you so much success and so much joy in your life. So thank you for everything that you're doing to ignite change in others. So
thank you, Angela. It was such a blast chatting, and I appreciate the forum and space you've created to have conversations that are deep and meaningful.
thank you. I appreciate that. And we will see everybody on the next episode of the Pretty Powerful Podcast. Have a great day, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining our guests on the Pretty Powerful Podcast. And we hope you've gained new insight and learned from exceptional women. Remember to subscribe or check out this and all episodes on prettypowerfulpodcast.com. Visit us next time. And until then, step into your own power.